Many travelers arrive in Japan expecting the same version of the country they saw in older travel videos, documentaries, anime-inspired content, or social media posts from only a few years ago. But the moment many visitors step into places like Tokyo, Kyoto, or Osaka today, they quickly realize something about modern travel in Japan feels noticeably different compared to the image many people still carry in their minds. The trains still run with incredible precision, the streets still appear remarkably clean, and the contrast between ancient tradition and futuristic technology still feels fascinating almost everywhere you go. Yet beneath that familiar image, Japan in 2026 is quietly experiencing enormous changes driven by tourism growth, shifting traveler behavior, rising costs, digital culture, infrastructure pressure, and changing expectations surrounding travel itself. What surprises many travelers most is not that Japan changed, but how quickly the atmosphere surrounding travel in the country evolved within only a few years. Places once associated with quiet exploration, calm neighborhoods, and reflective cultural experiences now often feel crowded, highly commercialized, and emotionally overstimulating during large parts of the year. This becomes especially noticeable in major tourism zones where international visitor numbers have surged dramatically following Japan's post-pandemic tourism recovery. Long before becoming one of the world's most desired travel destinations, Japan built its reputation through a combination of safety, efficiency, deep cultural identity, seasonal beauty, food culture, and a level of social order many travelers found almost surreal compared to other countries. For years, many visitors describe Japan as feeling emotionally different from almost anywhere else because daily life often appeared unusually organized, respectful, quiet, and structured. That emotional atmosphere still exists in many parts of the country today, but travelers increasingly notice it becoming harder to experience consistently in heavily visited areas. Around this point, many people begin realizing the hidden reality of Japan in 2026 is not simply about tourism numbers alone. It is about the collision between Japan's traditionally ordered social atmosphere and the enormous pressure created by modern global tourism moving through the country at unprecedented speed. Social media played a massive role in accelerating this transformation because Japan gradually became one of the world's most visually desirable travel destinations online. Millions of travelers now arrive carrying extremely specific expectations shaped by curated online content showing empty shrines, peaceful bamboo forests, quiet alleyways, cinematic train rides, and perfectly composed cultural moments. The reality many visitors encounter instead often includes crowded train stations, packed tourist districts, long attraction lines, reservation shortages, rising accommodation prices, and enormous international tourism density across famous destinations. This emotional gap between expectation and reality is one reason some travelers leave Japan feeling strangely overwhelmed despite still admiring the country deeply overall. Places like Fushimi Inari Taisha, Shibuya Crossing, and Arashiyama Bamboo Grove now attract enormous volumes of visitors almost constantly during peak travel periods. Many travelers are shocked by how crowded some iconic locations feel compared to the peaceful imagery dominating online travel content. At the same time, Japan still offers extraordinary moments of calmness, beauty, precision, and cultural depth for travelers willing to move more slowly and adapt expectations realistically. This is why experiences in Japan today often depend heavily on timing, pacing, flexibility, and willingness to explore beyond the most saturated tourism zones. Many experienced visitors now deliberately avoid peak travel hours, move away from heavily viral locations, and prioritize quieter regional areas instead. That shift is becoming increasingly important because Japan's tourism infrastructure is now balancing enormous international demand alongside local daily life pressures. In cities like Tokyo and Osaka, travelers often notice how intensely efficient the country remains even while managing huge tourism volumes simultaneously. Train systems continue operating remarkably smoothly, digital payment systems are becoming increasingly widespread, translation technology keeps improving rapidly, and navigation apps now make movement across the country dramatically easier than before. At the same time, many travelers quietly notice Japan feels less intimidating than older generations of visitors once described. Technology reduced many barriers that previously made Japan feel mysterious or difficult for first-time international travelers. Apps now simplify restaurant ordering, transportation navigation, hotel communication, and translation in ways that make independent travel much easier than in previous years. This convenience helps explain why Japan continues attracting record levels of global tourism despite rising costs and increasing crowd density. At the same time, rising prices are becoming one of the biggest surprises for travelers arriving in Japan during 2026. Many people still imagine Japan through older stereotypes of affordable convenience stores, inexpensive ramen shops, and relatively manageable transportation costs compared to Western countries. While Japan can still offer excellent value compared to some global destinations, many travelers now notice hotels, attractions, transportation, and tourism-focused areas becoming significantly more expensive than expected. This becomes especially visible in places heavily influenced by international tourism demand. Accommodation shortages during peak seasons now affect many major cities because tourism growth frequently outpaces available capacity in popular regions. Some travelers also notice that parts of Japan feel more internationally adapted than before because businesses increasingly cater toward global tourism behavior. English signage has expanded dramatically, tourism services became more internationally focused, and heavily visited districts sometimes feel less culturally immersive than travelers originally expected. This creates an emotional contradiction because Japan still feels distinctly Japanese while simultaneously becoming more globally tourism-oriented than in previous decades. Many longtime visitors say the country feels more accessible today but slightly less emotionally isolated from the outside world compared to older travel eras. That change is neither entirely positive nor entirely negative because greater accessibility also allows far more people to experience parts of Japan that once felt difficult to navigate independently. At the same time, many travelers now intentionally seek quieter alternatives to heavily saturated tourism zones. Regions like Shikoku, the Japanese Alps, rural Tohoku, and smaller coastal towns increasingly attract visitors looking for slower experiences beyond the major tourism circuits. This shift may become one of the biggest travel trends in Japan moving forward because many travelers are no longer searching only for famous landmarks. They are searching for emotional atmosphere, quietness, authenticity, slower pacing, and relief from the intensity of highly saturated global tourism environments. Japan still provides those experiences remarkably well in many areas for travelers willing to move beyond highly optimized social media itineraries. The hidden reality of traveling Japan in 2026 is that the country now exists between two very different travel identities simultaneously. One version reflects the globally famous tourism image driven by crowds, viral destinations, rapid movement, and highly optimized travel culture. The other version still reflects the quieter emotional side of Japan built around rhythm, observation, seasonal beauty, local routines, regional identity, and slower cultural immersion. Most travelers move between these two versions constantly while exploring the country. One moment may feel peaceful, reflective, and deeply memorable, while the next feels crowded, overstimulating, and heavily commercialized only a short distance away. This emotional contrast is now part of the modern Japan travel experience itself. And once travelers understand that Japan in 2026 requires flexibility, pacing, realistic expectations, and a willingness to move beyond highly curated online versions of the country, the experience often becomes far more rewarding than people initially expected.